Hi, folks. This is the third in a series of talks that we feel like it's important for us to share with anybody who wants to listen out there. It's Church with Joe and Betsy, right?
Well, we were actually just having a conversation. We were just listening to
And this is Palm Sunday. And so we thought we would share what we're discussing with you guys. Anybody wants to hear. Just to introduce what we're talking about, I was listening to the Bible Project Church at Home Week 3, and it's on the Gospel of the Kingdom, and we were responding to what Tim Mackey is saying there from the book of Isaiah, and the specific passage about those whose feet are beautiful, who carry the good news to the people of Israel at the time, and relating it to the gospel account and Jesus. Good news meaning gospel, meaning good news, and how those two passages are related. And in that process, I mentioned to Betsy that I got up this morning and I was listening to another talk on YouTube that has to do with IFS work, internal family systems work. And as a family therapist, I have been incorporating that into my practice and find it very effective in helping people work through conflict internally and also work through conflict with other people. It's a very powerful modality. But one of the things that I came across in this and I knew this to be true about IFS work, that one of the foundational principles is that the self is good. The self is good, and the self interacts with other parts of the person that helps to bring about healing. And my particular struggle with that is from a theological position, because the theological position to me says the self is not good and broken. Jesus says that out of the core of man's heart are all these bad behaviors. And so I'm thinking, well, I was asking God, Lord, show me something that would give me a better idea of how to understand what's going on here. And there's Bandit. And so as I was listening to this Bible project,
my new haircut,
right, Bible project talk, and with understanding the kind of things that takes place when the gospel occurs, it occurred to me that an understanding of this IFS work is from a Christian perspective, and not just from a secular perspective, that holds on to the idea that the self is not good, but explains what is taking place in the process of interaction. And
it's the idea of we are broken.
Yeah, we are broken.
They don't have this idea that you're broken, and there's always this idea that people are basically good, and clearly, and you can look around, the world we live in, the human condition, according to what we believe as Christians, is that the problem is that we all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And
right.
Everybody's kind of out for himself, and given the opportunity, most of us would not choose to be Mother Teresa,
Right.
I mean, and even that, if you know anything about her, it was a choice that she made.
And I don't think she would say necessarily the self is good, even in her activity, and the wonderful things that she was able to do.
Right.
But so anyway, trying to explain where I'm going with this.
So we were talking about how people, how the self how people are parts of yourself try to heal or try to help other parts of yourself. So you've grown up in a really difficult situation. The angst that you feel, the way that you behave, a lot of those things are an attempt to deal with the broken aspects of your life.
Yeah, let me give you a little bit of background to IFS work. So what you do is there are the particular aspects of IFS work that you need to identify, and one of the things is that that there are parts of you that react to situations, and then they behave in certain ways that are dysfunctional, or maybe even functional, but they create even functional behaviors can create havoc if a person holds on it too tenaciously or tightly. And there are parts of us that do that, and it creates problems in our lives. And what you do is you help the person to connect to that reactive part. And a lot of times there's a lot of negativity surrounding it. And you bring a sense of love and welcome into the aspect of that person's behavior, that's part of the part. And that begins a transformation of the individual in a sort of a really dramatic way. And so you were mentioning how
I asked the question when we were growing up, which was 1,000 years ago. Did Joe know anyone who cut themselves? It's I know that there are people who injure themselves because of extreme abuse and that sort of thing, but it's almost become it gets out there and it's sort of an in vogue thing to do. Oh yes, cut yourself. And I did know someone growing up who cut themselves. It was someone who'd been severely, just really grew up in a horrible situation. I never even equated it. I never thought in terms of cutting themselves. I just knew that this person had scars all over their arms. Very, very sweet person.
And I told you that I knew of a person that didn't cut themselves, or a couple of people, now that I think about it. But what they would do was take a cigarette and they would burn themselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you could see scars on their arms and their hands where cigarette burns occurred. And so which was at that particular time, I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was kind of strange that people would do that, but I didn't think that was connected to anything that the person was struggling with internally, right? Mm-hmm. And so these are some of the big kind of behaviors that IFS kind of addresses, right? And so what you do in IFS work is that you talk to the person and you get them to identify that particular part that would do something like that, and you bring them welcome. You actually help them to recognize that is a part who's trying to make a good thing happen, believe it or not, to the person, even though it's highly dysfunctional, even though it may be looked at as weird and strange and rebellious.
This isn't an endorsement of that behavior by any stretch of
No.
You're just saying that when a person is that broken, that they are self-harming or very self-harming behavior, whether it's like over using things that they shouldn't be using. Drugs can be alcohol.
We recently saw a wonderful series on Amazon called Patrick Melrose, and so it's brand new, and it's about the life of this character, and he was severely abused as a child, and he becomes a drug addict and an alcoholic. And I'm watching this process take place, and of course, I've worked with people like that, and so, and to me, as I was watching it, I could understand how the alcohol and the drugs would protect him from the pain that he was carrying all the time in his life.
It's an escape.
And it's an escape from the pain that the person's. And so in the memories, and so, but you can see also how destructive it was in other people's lives, and also in his life. So, from an outside perspective, you would go, you just need to change. You're bad. You need to be a person who just needs to get rid of that, and when you approach a person that way, there's it doesn't work.
Kind of forces them further into the
it
cave,
causes the part of the one who's protecting to actually react more negatively, and then retract into their self-protective behavior even more.
And it is self-protective. It's I'm going to lose my mind if I can't numb the pain.
Right, exactly.
This guy in this case, what was the name of the guy?
Patrick Melrose. It's a
Patrick
true
Melrose.
Story. It's not just a fictional account. It's a true story.
Really well done. Really, really well. What's the actor's name?
Oh, golly, I can't. He's Sherlock Holmes actor.
Right.
I can't pronounce his name.
He's
right.
amazing in this. He should win some kind of award.
Yeah.
But it's he has been sexually abused by
his father,
and from the age of a young child, he grew up very
8.
wealthy.
Yeah,
and apparently there were other children involved who were also abused. Sort of you get that background noise from it, but it's just so devastating to him. And even though he lives this, he's definitely of the 1%, right? British royalty,
right.
Just about.
Yes, right.
He's there. The system, the family system, is so incredibly dysfunctional, and it's painful to watch. I've cried through a lot of it. Just even they don't show it; they just infer it. What's going on, and it's heartbreaking. I couldn't watch parts of it, but the point is that the what he was trying to do was trying to put a Band-Aid on this.
Well, it's not just a Band-Aid, it's a way of escaping the reality of his experience, right? And so
his wound.
Yes,
he's trying to do something.
Yeah. Yes.
Just to not.
And without getting too far into the details of it, I want to keep on track with what I'm attempting to say, and
Yes.
that is the thing I'm trying to say is bring it back to the gospel. So the idea of the self, right, as being good, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's not so much that the self is good, but the act of the therapist, the act of the person bringing love into the context where there's destruction, where there may be even evil acts.
Yeah.
That's the kingdom of God breaking into our lives. Jesus is a person who brings love into the context of those who are evil, or those who are self-destructive, of those who are bent on self-protection to such an extent it causes problems in people's lives, which is the part of the self, right?
Right. Or people who are, you said people who are evil, and it's hard to, think in terms of the context of this person trying to deal with their own inner pain as being evil.
Right.
The broken, I think broken is a better word there. Broken because of human evil.
Yeah.
Because of the brokenness of.
And to me, evil is taking the behavior of self-protection to such an extent that you exclude the empathetic responses to other people's lives. so that you are just acting out of your own sense of self-protection, regardless of how it impacts other people.
Got it. Yeah.
That to me is what evil is.
Right.
And so you can have degrees of that, right?
Right.
And so the degrees of good, you go further into the opposite direction where you have your relationship in terms of a loving response to other people. But ultimately, the ultimate story, the ultimate narrative of this loving response to people is the life of Jesus. Self-sacrificial love.
Right.
And that he does it not just in relationship to other people, he does it in relationship to the Father. And that he is the illustration of this principle at work. And so when it comes to our own experience of the Father, what we're doing is as we learn to accept him as we allow ourselves to accept him as Savior and Lord in our life, what we're doing is bringing that love into our lives that comes from the Father that's so transformative. In 1 John it says, perfect love drives out fear. Because fear has to do with punishment and judgment. And so when Jesus comes into our life, he brings that power into our lives.
Well, there's not just, think about it in the context of what we were just talking about abuse.
Right.
That's not, you think of punishment and judgment as down the road. You know
right.
what I mean? That's the report card.
Right.
We're not talking about that. It drives out fear of the haunting of the abuse, or the fear of it happening again, or you doing it yourself, or just the horror that your life has been. That can be lifted.
That can be
miraculously lifted,
transformed,
which is incredible.
And so it's amazing to see this work in people's lives, because as I bring this kind of knowledge to these particular aspects of who they are, they have never even conceived of the fact that cutting or that hurting themselves in some way or use of drinking has any sense whatsoever of having a sort of a welcoming, profound effect in a positive direction.
So you're saying, correct me here, you're saying that for a person who has struggled with self-destructive behavior or thinking,
right,
or
let's say that working 80 hours a week and neglecting their family, or
which is also self-destructive.
Right.
There's a reason that they're doing that. Their anxiety.
Their anxiety,
or
right.
need to control, or whatever it is.
It's a sense of self-protection.
Lack of trust,
right.
Lack of faith that God will take care of. And right now, I'm sure a huge percentage of everybody out there is feeling the same way. There's terrible fear right now of the unknown.
Right.
Going to the grocery store, that's terrible, Not only not knowing whether you'll have the resources to continue to pay. Should I spend money? Should I do this? Should I do that? Just, will I get sick? Just on and on and on.
You see people fighting in Walmart over a roll of toilet paper.
Well, probably not a roll, but
a package of rolls of toilet paper. Well, I wouldn't be surprised they fought over a roll of toilet paper. It gets down to that kind of thing.
It gets nutty, and
so these people are acting badly, obviously, but and the behavior is about and given a context in which they can sort of separate themselves out from that behavior. And you go, so why did you do this, right? Right. And so there's a part of them that was scared that they're not going to have what they needed, and out of that fear, this self-protective behavior comes out, and then takes over and begins to dominate.
Right. I have to get mine.
I have to get mine.
Get
right.
mine. I think back. This is really an interesting subject, because I think back. I being 100% Jewish, two Jewish parents, I am a believer. I am a believer in Jesus as Messiah. But coming from 100% Jewish bloodlines, I heard stories all my life about how I was born like 10 years after the fall of the Third Reich. And, you know, I mean, I think about the horror of slavery, and African American people are still suffering from that. And certainly it's, you know, when you wear your shame on your, you know, the color of your skin, that there's real stuff there. But we're looking at a couple hundred years. When you're looking at 10 years and your parents are really screwed up because they grew up terrified that they were, you know, they were going to die. All of my relatives and my grandparents came over. They all came over, and their many aunts and uncles and relatives that were still in Lithuania predominantly, but some in Germany, all died in the camps. I have no relatives left from what I understand. And it's, you know, you realize the condition of man is not, we're basically good. You know, there's something really wrong out there.
Right.
So you've got, you know, but there's this brokenness that you take with you, this sort of fear. And, you know, I've read so many books on the subject. I've listened to so many stories on the subject. I think of the Ten Boom family, who were Christians in Amsterdam, and how they hid Jews. And they called it, Corrie ten Boom wrote a book, it was called The Hiding Place. They hid them in their home. And, you know, not only the risk that you take, because greater love has no man than this, that he lays down his life for his friends, to have that faith in God in a horrible time like that, when apparently the Dutch people were having to, they were getting food rations, and to take the food for your own family, when you can perfectly justify, we only have enough for us. It's not like you've got, you know, extra toilet paper stashed somewhere, you know. You've only got enough food for yourselves. The risk of hiding Jews was you were going to go to concentration camp, which they ended up going into the camps.
Yeah.
And
in IFS work, right, that would externally the Jews would have been what are called exiles inside of us. Those parts of us that are hopeless and without worth, right?
Right.
And then the Ten Boom family would be the healthy managers and who are trying to protect the exiles. And externally, what's taking place there?
So if you're looking at all the people as people inside of yourself,
yes,
different
right.
aspects of your personality,
yes,
it's complicated.
Yeah. Yes.
And then we have a dog.
That's right.
Our menagerie. You can't get with the cat who's on the windowsill.
No.
So anyway,
so I'm sorry I interrupted your story.
No, that's okay. I was going to say that that there's these voices in the back of my head that go, okay, I need to protect myself, protect my family. And of course that is, I think, always our first responsibility is to take care of our family,
right.
Take care of our children. We really
which is good.
Praying over our grandchildren,
which is good
for safety. Yes, but as believers, we should know. I guess I should say we believe, or we attempt to believe. It's really pretty shallow. We really struggle because we see through it, as Paul said, we see through the glass darkly now. We really are struggling.
Right.
But we should be excited about what God's going to do. We have to be excited about it. Have to go.
You might even say that God is that true self, that self who is good.
Well, that kind of makes you into God. That sounds a little like Eastern mysticism.
No, but it's I know it, and
I know you don't mean that.
No, I don't want to go in that direction where you are God, but there is an aspect of when God comes into you, you are completely identified with
right.
Him. When you accept Jesus as Lord, you become identified with His self. His self takes over. Paul says it's no
The Holy
it's
Spirit.
no yes, it's I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live,
But Christ who lives.
but Christ who lives in me.
So God will speak to you. You should be able to hear God saying, that person down the street is alone and you need to reach out to them.
And the whole concept of loving your enemies is the act of loving your enemies is like carrying an aspect of that who Jesus is into others' lives. So it's like medicine, right, is an aspect of Jesus' miraculous work, right? That it's an extension. It's an extension of God's grace to the world. So Jesus becomes so when you are involving your life with other people in a loving way, you're actually taking an aspect of Jesus. Now, can you claim that for yourself? Ultimately, in terms of the theological struggles that we go through, in terms of understanding salvation, no, you can't claim it, right? In order to really connect to Jesus, you need to acknowledge who Jesus is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but nevertheless, you can be an atheist and love a person, and that loving aspect of your interaction is like carrying that light into the person's life, even though you don't believe in Jesus at all. Doesn't mean you're a Christian. Doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be saved at all. But it does mean that you're bringing that light into the person's life. Does that make sense?
No, but it's okay.
Okay.
No, I was thinking about something else.
Okay.
I was the point that I was trying to make earlier was just that it's very not that far in my distant memory.
Mm-hmm.
This fear. I mean, I was told when I was a little girl, don't tell people you're Jewish. Don't tell people. People say, oh, what nationality are you? You can say I'm
Right.
Lithuanian. You can say, oh, I'm Mediterranean, whatever, which are all sort of true, But don't tell people you're Jewish because
that would expose you
that would
to.
expose you, right?
Right.
And
That's
it's
like
interesting how
that's
many.
like you're exposing your exile.
Right, and it's amazing how many Jews I've read about, listened to, podcast things, who are believers who have been, who thought that, who didn't know that Jesus was Jewish. They thought that Jesus was Catholic or something. They're just the misinformation. But stay away from that. This protection. You need to protect yourself. And so here we are in this situation where there's this need to protect ourselves. Right? We're being told, stay home, you need to protect yourself. And I definitely do think that we don't want to add to the incredible job, the incredible amount of work that the medical community is up against. We definitely be praying for them and helping in any way we can. If you have resources, be generous in whatever way, whatever needs to happen. But while we're going through this sort of feeling of fear and exile, the thoughts, you hear people talk about, well, the next thing that's going to happen, we're going to have civil unrest and people are going to be trying to break into houses to find food, they won't have money. That happens anyway. Even in the best of times, people break in.
Right.
But you're not necessarily here, but these things happen.
So what are you saying?
How I'm trying to wrap this up is that there's a paradigm shift that takes place when we look at the situation. We step into faith, where it's not just, okay, I go to church, I have this faith, where we put on the boots, we put on whatever, the breastplate, the various, we're arming ourselves not with toilet paper and boarding the windows and shutting down the bank account and I'm not going to pay my bills or whatever it happens to be. We're not arming ourselves with fear and anxiety, which are very similar to using heroin when you've been abused. I mean, we're you know, I mean, you can eat yourself on the inside. You kill yourself slowly with fear and anxiety too. But rather than fear and anxiety, if we are truly walking in faith, we should have joy. We should believe in the promise that God is for us and not against us.
Right.
You know, that
which is the concept of that what I'm talking about.
Right. No,
Right.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. I was just saying from the perspective of this little girl inside of me,
Right.
who is really scared of what people think of me. I'm a people pleaser to the point of it's absurd. I really worry about what people think of me and doing the right thing. I'm the opposite of my parents, who were always rebelling. I just always want to behave. I want to do the right thing. I don't want to break any rules, and want everybody to love me and be happy. That is also defense. It's a defensive thing. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to open myself up to possibly putting myself in a relationship with you where you will come back and hurt me. So at this point, what are our options? Being vulnerable. Being vulnerable. Okay. I'm not sure what that's going to mean.
Well, what I'm saying is that, and I think you're posing the problem practically for people, is that how do I act in loving ways toward others? How do I become like the Ten Boom family? How do I do those kinds of things? And what?
Okay, so how do I, if I find out my neighbor has no toilet paper and I have toilet paper, how do I go, Lord, I'm going to share my toilet paper, and I'm going to just trust you that we will have the toilet paper we need.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you know.
Well, and that's how do we become like Mother Teresa, right? How do we serve people
How do
like
we
that?
lay down our lives?
Right. And the thing that I'm making connections with is that in this IFS work is that the first aspect of that is allowing your protectors to know that they're okay.
Yes.
Right, so that they can begin to let go of their need to protect.
Right.
And see, this is where the gospel comes, because those aspects of you need to be addressed before that part of you that is so vulnerable can have the strength to do what it needs to do. Anyway, just thought we would share this with you this morning. I know it's probably right, and that says that we need to end right there. All right, thanks. Bye bye.